We are live.
This is Literary Roadhouse. One short story once a week. I'm Tamara.
I'm Gerald.
I'm Remy.
I'm Anais.
And I'm Maya. And before we get started, we're going to be discussing... Wow, my brain
Escape
just
from
totally...
Spiderhead.
Thank you. Brain freeze. Total brain freeze. We're going to be discussing... Before we get started, we're going to be discussing Escape from Spiderhead by George Saunders. And we have a special guest co-host, Tamara Woods. If you hear any background noise, that is because she lives in amazing Hawaii, and we get a wonderful cacophony of birds in her background today. Tamara is the writer of the... Fuck, what is up with my brain today?
You can do it.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. Why me? Why me? 1 second. I'm so sorry, Tamara. I'm going to redo your intro. That was horrible. I was fine, and then all of a sudden my brain just is freezing for no reason, and I can't think. I just literally can't think. Okay. Let's start over. I'm going to start over with my introduction. Okay? So today we have a guest co-host, Tamara Woods. If you hear background noise, that is because she lives in the amazing state of Hawaii, and so we get a cacophony of birds in our background today, and they sound quite beautiful. Tamara is she's essentially the founding member and co-editor of the Reverie Poetry Journal. She is also the author of The Shaping of an Angry Black Woman. And she is part of our new Literary Roadhouse family. We're going to be working on a very special project over the next coming months. So welcome her to the family.
Hey, welcome.
Hi, everyone.
We're really excited to have you. So tell us a little bit about your relationship with reading. We ask this to all of our guest co-hosts when they first come on.
I love reading, and I'm a voracious reader, and I'm one of those people that if I get involved with one book and there's a series, then I have to read all the books in the series almost compulsively, and it's kind of ridiculous. But I've been a reader for like as long as I can remember, since I was a little girl, and my mom would read to me, and then I learned how to read to her. And
That's
it's just
really
never
sweet. And you, being the founding member of a poetry journal, you have a book of poetry out. Poetry seems to be a really large part of your life. And I understand your poetry is a little different. Can you tell us a little bit about your poetry?
What I try to concentrate on with my poetry is, one, situations that are personal to me, but that I think that other people can relate to. And I try to talk about the human experience, especially as being a female, Black, and an American. And I just try to tell people what that's like.
Excellent. And so I think we're ready for our summary.
Okay. This week we have been reading Escape from Spiderhead by George Saunders. The story is presumably set in the future where Jeff, our main character, has been convicted of murder. Instead of going to jail, his mum buys his prison... Oh, sorry.
We're having one of those days, Gerald. Start over. Any can cut it.
Yeah, from the beginning, or else it sounds weird.
We'll cut it in post.
Okay. Today we're going to be reading Escape from Spiderhead by George Saunders. The story is presumably set in the future where Jeff, our main character, has been convicted of murder. Instead of going to jail, his mum buys him his prison term in a research facility. Inmates are subjected to a number of tests while simultaneously being fed a cocktail of behaviour-altering drugs from a pack on their back. But one day, after watching a fellow female inmate kill herself after spending too long on the Darkenfloss drug, Jeff refuses to comply with instructions, throwing the whole experimentation procedure into chaos.
So we on this podcast like to start top level. So how did everybody just initial feelings about this story? Who wants to start?
I'll start. I loved it, which was no surprise, and I'm really glad Saunders didn't disappoint me on the second time. It was tasty. There was like some places where I was so excited I started like squirming in my chair. Like, I'm not exaggerating.
I like it when you get that excited, Eddie. Who wants to go next?
Yeah, I'll go next. Yeah, I've unlike Rami, I don't read my stories first, so I had no idea what this was going to be like. But I know George Saunders, and as Annie said, he didn't disappoint. It's a sort of near future sci-fi, but it's great. It's a gripping story.
Tamara?
Initially, it didn't catch me at first, and so it took me a couple pages to really get into it, but then once I was in, I was locked.
Good. And how about you, Remy?
I think it was very creative. I liked the idea. I didn't enjoy the graphic parts, but it's creative.
Okay, I'm going to need you to repeat that because something just majorly happened to the sound, and I'm not sure that came through.
Oh, sorry.
There's a car that started over here, sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
I thought it was creative, the approach, but I didn't appreciate the graphic parts. I think that went on a little too long.
I loved it. I'm like Annie's. I loved it from the very beginning. I actually like this a lot more than Semplica Girl Diaries. Like, I love this a lot more. And I think I'm becoming a Saunders fan. I'm glad that we have a good variety of opinions on today's podcast. I think having our guest co-host is a really wonderful addition because otherwise we would have only had Rami on the nay side.
He's okay with that.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, it was a graphic story. This is one of those stories where our show's going to end up being explicit, even if none of us says a bad word, just because the content of the story is explicit. It kind of necessitates that. Was Rami the only one that really had a problem with the explicit nature of the story? Like, you all know me. I can...
It seems like that's a yes.
Yeah, I was fine with it. And actually, I didn't even think it was. I mean, it was explicit in the sense that it's writing sex scenes, but it's not really writing sex scenes.
Yeah.
It's more about. Yeah, it's about
like metaphor and feeling. I actually felt like, you read sex scenes in like romance novels, and they're super explicit, but they're not sexy. And I felt like this one was not explicit, but it was sexy in the use of metaphor and the use of language as a way of describing the emotions of sex without using like this leg went here and this arm went there kind of BS.
Yeah, I feel like it wasn't written
to
scintillate anyone.
Oh, come on. He only flipped her over a couple times.
He did say at one point. He did say legs way up.
Yeah, legs are up in the air.
That's not explicit, Remy.
Thanks for walking me through that.
We're just gonna read the whole passage to Remy. That's the rest of the podcast.
Every time, yeah, do every podcast.
Oh, Remy, we love you. How about you, Tamara? How did you feel about the sex scenes? Because I know writing sex scenes is like a big subject in writing because so many people do it badly. How do you feel like this was done?
I didn't really think of it as explicit. So but I read a lot of romance. So
you're used to the legs and the bosoms and the heaving and
and his strong manhood and this, that, and the other.
Why do we do that? Why do we do that in our writing? It's so bad. I felt like this sex scene was so much more sexy than all of that other stuff that we've been reading since like the 70s. Okay, let's get off of the sex scene because there's so much more to this story. I mean, this story has a really strong depth to it. So I guess the question that I want to ask each of you, see if we can come to a consensus or see if each of us read the story differently because that's happened. Last week's a perfect example. What do you guys think is the core theme of the story? What do you think this story is about? Jump right in there.
Okay. Geraldine,
It's a little different because we've got 5 hosts today. So everybody just feel free to jump on in there. If we need to cut, adjust to make us not over talk, don't worry about it. Don't hesitate. Just say what you're thinking.
So I was gonna say it kind of has like 2 tracks for me. So the one track is obviously the love track. Is it purely biochemical? Well, clearly there's a chemical component of it, or isn't there? Like there's that kind of aspect to it. But more than that, I felt like there was this idea of science robbing humanity. So it robs their intelligence, their feelings, their personality, shaping it to its will, and then also their life with the dark and flux. And then towards the end, with the docile ride, the final thing that it's trying to take away from Jeff as a human is his agency, his ability to choose. And he says, no, that's not going to happen. He draws the line there and takes it into his own hand. And I think that's the bigger one. And I think the love one is kind of beneath that to amplify the main one.
Yeah, I actually am reading this very closely to you, which is interesting because a lot of times we read these stories totally different. Mm-hmm. This story, I felt like the question of human agency was so huge, especially when it came to the end where it was like, okay, let's give him docile ride, and Viviane is like, well, we need to get his consent. He's like, what use is this drug if we have to have his consent to use it? And that whole question of consent to give away consent was a really interesting core question as far as using science to adjust our emotions and our feelings. I thought that was really interesting. The question of love was really interesting. What is love? Is it purely biochemical? Does it matter if we know it's purely biochemical and we can adjust it? Does it change anything about it? Does it make it less meaningful in some way? I thought that was a really interesting question. And then the whole question of just general murder. He had been taught that murder was bad during therapy, and then he's told to murder somebody and told it's good all of a sudden because it's for science. And as a Buddhist, as a pacifist, I confront these ideas and emotions all the time in the news and the TV. It's when is murder okay? If I'm a pacifist, is war okay? If I'm a pacifist, is the death penalty okay? There's all these questions is it always bad, or is it only bad in certain situations? And I think this story really brought that up for me.
Yeah, I think the key.
Sorry.
Okay, keep going. Anise is God this week.
Wow. Yeah, I think it was interesting when they were. When they had to decide whether to give the what's it called, the darkened flux to the other person that's in the room, and they're sitting there, and which one shall they give it to? And I think that it shows that they were being put in a position of playing God, and they said, no, I can't decide which one to give it to. So they then had to repeat the experiment or extend the experiment further, because they didn't get the result that they wanted from it. So I think they were pushing the experimentation more. It was less about the let's do this and see what the result is. They were then pushing them to conduct experiments, but because the results they had got weren't correct or weren't what they were looking for.
Yeah, they were ambiguous results, and they wanted a more clear result. And that's something that science confronts all the time. These are really prescient issues. How about you, Remy?
Yeah, no, I agree with what you and Ais said. I feel like it had a lot to do with control, about free will.
Mm-hmm. Tamara?
It reminded me of, let me see, what was it called? There was this scientific experiment where there would be people and they would have to press a button, mm-hmm. and it would inflict pain on someone else. Remember that?
Yeah, the Stanford experiments.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. No, that's Stanley Milgram.
Yeah, Milgram. That's the one.
Yeah.
And that's what this kind of reminded me of. They were quite clearly trying to erase their sense of humanity. And I felt like their experimentation started with thinking that they didn't have that core of humanity because they had murdered before. So they should be able to just murder again or do whatever they needed to do because they didn't have that moral compass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you, as I was reading it, I actually thought both of the Milgram and the Stanford, like those experiments, like just immediately came to mind, and the whole structure of the story was very uncomfortable, but in an interesting way. But one of the things that I thought was like the most beautiful passage to me about this story, and you bring up humanity. There's that passage when he's watching Helen and he is watching her destroy herself in essence, and he is describing his emotions about her as a human, not as a woman, not as an individual, but as a human. And that whole passage I found very beautiful.
Yeah, I liked that passage, and also the one where he talks about. So, Tamara was talking about um, it. They thought that these would be good test subjects because it seems like they have a weakened moral compass. But Jeff's the only one that has the strongest moral compass because Abnesti and Verlaine are willing to shift the blame for the murder that they're about to commit. Especially the second time with Rachel, where they know she's probably gonna die. They shift it to science, or they shift it to the protocol committee. Where even though Jeff is the one who can truly say he is not at fault, he has that line. All I have to do to kill again is wait. He waits. The fax, so that was hilarious, a fax to Albany suddenly robs him of agency, and then he truly, you can argue, is blameless, but he says no, he still takes ownership of that and still acts.
Mm-hmm. I also found the Skyping his mother quite funny. Like, this story felt like it was futuristic, and then they bring in Skype and a fax machine. I'm like,
Yeah.
what? I'm a little confused
Albany.
here. Are we still using fax machines 15, 20 years from now? I guess so.
Are we using it now, or do they exist?
Hey, lawyers still use typewriters, so, you know.
Yeah, there's always been tales and conspiracy theories about the government feeding various concoctions to armies and stuff to make them go out and want to fight
Well, we've
other
done
people.
it. Yeah. Like, at least in the U.S., we have precedent.
Trying
Not
to
very good precedent.
create the perfect soldier.
That is such a. I hate the term slippery slope. It sounds so cliche, but there you go. Said it.
Mhm.
So how do we feel about the language of the story? For me, it felt very tight. I felt like this story, when I read the previous story that we read of his, I enjoyed it a great deal, but I felt like this story, the language was much tighter. I felt like it was almost like last week's story where I didn't see any sentences, I didn't see any paragraphs that didn't feel like they needed to be there. I didn't stumble. I didn't reread any part of the story. A lot of times I'll reread sections because they're not exactly clear, even with some of the greats. Like, come on, we've torn apart everybody. And this story was very tight feeling to me as far as language.
Mm. Yeah, I loved the language. I loved the. I mean, we've talked on this podcast before about sort of iceberg and wanting a story at the top that engages you, and the writing needs to engage you, and straight off the bat, it did that for me. Even though it's kind of a strange concept, but yeah, I found the language really good and really well written, very clearly written.
And how about our special guest? How do you feel about it as our resident poet for the day?
I thought the language was pretty clear. I felt like when he was discussing his emotions, I kind of skipped over that part a little bit.
It wasn't holding your interest at all.
No, I was just like, all right, I get it, and let's just get back to the thing. But I don't know. That's just me.
Well, I think that's important because, like, what do they say? You know, when I'm editing my stories, I have to mark any part that I get, like, the instinct or the urge to skim. Like, that is a huge thing. Like, I have to know where my skim points are. So if you had the urge to skim those sections, I think it says something about how the language didn't necessarily hold you in the way that he was expressing his emotions. Did it hold you, Remy?
Okay, so specifically about the language. Now, in the beginning, I felt like it was a little bit like unnecessarily convoluted, and what came to my mind was George Orwell's essay, The Politics and the English Language, because I was really lost, like what is he trying to say, and I felt like a lot of it could have been much more simplified. So he says, it was as if a garden had become a sort of embodiment of the domestic dreams forever intrinsic to human consciousness. I don't know what that means. I have no idea what that means. It was as if I could suddenly discern the ancient corollary through which Plato and some of his contemporaries might have strolled to it. I was sensing the eternal and the ephemeral. Like, I know what those words mean. I just don't know what he was
What they
trying
mean
to say.
together in a block.
No, Ravi,
I
you are
think it's
breaking
really
my heart.
important that you say that, Remy, because there are a lot of readers who are going to read that and have that feeling and might not be willing to admit it.
Yeah, no, but okay, yes, I hear exactly what Rami is saying, and I've read The Politics of the English Language, Orwell's thing, and I have to disagree with that reading of it because in that example you gave me, Saunders is, in my opinion, geniusly doing that on purpose. That paragraph starts off super simple, and he's like, he added some verbaluce to the drip, and soon I was feeling the same things but saying them better. That's a simple sentence. The garden still looked nice. Simple. It was like the bushes were so tight seeming and the sun made everything stand out? Question mark. It was like any moment.
Why was there a question mark right
Because
there?
because he's like
he's
I thought it was a
working
typo.
through the drugs that are making him more verbose.
right. So the reason by the time he gets to the end, he is talking like that because it's the drug. So I thought that paragraph was genius because it's like a gradient of like simple language to like convoluted metaphor, very abstract.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Then maybe I missed that part. And then, what was I gonna say? Yeah, afterwards it gets simplified again, normal. But then, if that was due to the drugs, how come the whole thing didn't continue that way?
It happens.
They turn
It,
it
it
down.
goes back to simple, and then it'll go back because he gets verbaluce several times throughout the story, and then it'll go back. So it's like this sliding scale.
And then, so a few times, I wasn't sure if this was a typo or not. He says "re," just "re," like "re" our intentions or "re" our love, and I'm not sure. Does it mean regarding? And why was it just like thrown in there like that? "Re" our sensations. I mean, there was like we now began freestyling "re" our sensations and thoughts.
Yeah, it's shorthand, just like we would say shorthand on
So
Twitter.
is this like how they talk in the future then?
Well, we say that now. We type it now. I think he's taking something that's commonly done in really loose communication and putting that in the short story. It's not something you see frequently.
He did it in the
have you seen
Semplica
it
Girl.
in a short story? I think it was in Semplica Girl, right?
It was in Semplica Girls. So was my favorite thing, the exclamation point between parentheses. That was one of the points where I like jumped out of my chair.
I love that. That is cool. Yeah, it's fun when grammar and punctuation get interesting.
Yeah, like he did it again. And also when he was like, they didn't know how close they came to getting Dark and Flocks out their wing wangs. I don't know why I love that sentence. Wing wang.
Which brings to mind, like his writing style. It seems like the writing style of a master, someone who's older, someone who's written a lot, but yet it's fresh and it's young. There's something very fresh about the way George Saunders writes. Like, it seems like it's a story written by a really, really young author with the wisdom of a really, really old author. And I am starting to really appreciate him and think that my writing is horrible after reading him.
Yeah, between Saunders and Lauren Groff, I'm like, I give up.
Maybe I'll just, do book formatting for my life's work, I guess. Yeah. I can't live up.
It's my contribution.
I love the fact that he takes literary fiction into a sort of sci-fi arena. I think that's because it's a real story. It's not just he's not trying too hard to be a literary writer. And yet he is. It's really, really good.
Yeah, it goes back to our conversation before about original literary fiction was of any genre that just happened to become literary. and the modern thing now is to write literary fiction, but people didn't do that originally. They just wrote stories. And I appreciate that about him. I think that's probably one of the reasons why I'm enjoying him so much, is because there is such a strong story thread throughout his stories.
Mm.
And I think also because he's so distinct. I feel like now that I have a better feel for him, you can give me anything he's written, I'd be like, oh, you can identify it. Like there's something about the way he writes that feels like,
Yeah, it's like Carver. You can just always tell.
yeah.
Mm.
Now I want to read more of the stories.
It's interesting. Like sci-fi literary fiction, like is this sci-fi? Is it futurism? Is it an alternate modern reality? Like I kind of feel like it's kind of alternate modern reality. Is it alternate? Do we know what's happening in those buildings? Like maybe it's not alternate at all. Um, it's interesting that you say sci-fi. I'm not sure how I would classify this. I will say the names of the drugs are all really lame. Come on, George, you can do better than that.
I thought they were great.
Yeah.
They sounded
Really
like
stiff.
some 1950s version of like, this is an Electrolux. It feels like some 1950s version of drug names.
Speed her up. How about speed her up?
I think he did it on purpose because he did the same thing in the Sempica Girl Diaries where he had nods to all these like 1950s thing. And like there was other things in common. Like the narrator sounded earnest, curious, but uneducated. Just like the
Yeah.
Sempica Girl guy. Like he definitely has a type he goes for.
Yeah, definitely. But I had to chuckle a little bit at the drug names. I found them quite funny.
Yeah. But they're so descriptive. I like them. I wish we had drugs called that. It would be really cool.
Vivistiff instead of Viagra. I thought that was great.
This stuff was pretty awesome. So, do you guys see any symbolism in this story that really stands out to you? As I was reading the story, I didn't really see much except for the repetition of what he saw when he was in complete ecstasy. I thought that was interesting, how his description of sexual ecstasy, like the scene of the plants and then the cabin, it was the exact same description later on, where his ecstasy was repeated. It wasn't varied in some way. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to make of it. It kind of reminds me of the initial garden description where it seems like something about having a nice garden is, and the way that it inspires people is eternal. So that comes up kind of twice, but
Or
other
maybe
than that.
it's that his version of ecstasy is his version of ecstasy, and every time he feels ecstasy, that's going to be what comes up for him.
Yeah, though I wonder if there's something instinctual about nature. I mean, as much as I hate
Well,
New
I think
England
there
gardens
is.
being described in short stories, I can still, say that
There's a
nature in
reason why
general.
New England gardens are described in short stories.
Yeah, like it seems to be something that as humans we're drawn to, right?
Which reminds me, I'm never going to be able to write a New England garden in a short story without
No.
thinking of you in my head. Thanks, Annie's.
Done.
Don't do it. Step away from that garden.
How about you guys? Anyone else?
No,
Okay.
I think it's the sort of, I think that's one of the things that one of the things problems I have with it. One of the few problems I have with it is its sort of lack of depth. I think it's very superficial. It's very on the surface, and you can relate to it. You can understand it. You can understand this situation, and it's not beyond the realms of possibility that this sort of thing could be happening or could happen in the near future. And yes, the controlling of people through drugs, and there's one bit where he describes the other another test, the other tests that he's been doing, and he said, I found I could still stand 15 straight hours at a fake cash register, miraculously suddenly able to do extremely long division problems in my mind. So there you get what they're doing, and you understand what the purpose behind this facility is. But it's it's kind of hard to explain. But I think superficial.
You know what?
Explains it.
Annie's was like ready to jump through her screen for a second.
Okay.
Well,
But
because you
I'm
just want to
inclined
sit
to
there
agree
being
with you,
wrong all
Gerald. I
day.
love the story. I love the story to pieces. But the fact that when I ask you guys, like, about any symbolism that stood out for you, it was dead silence says something. Okay? Because as I read the story, I could pick out resonance, but I really couldn't pick out symbolism the way we did with, say, the yellow wallpaper. Like, some stories have really distinct symbols that lead you to think deeper about certain parts of the story, and this story really didn't have that. Like, there were layers, but it wasn't like an onion. It was more like a 3-layer parfait.
Yeah, I feel like, okay, so if we're equating symbolism with depth, then no, because I don't think he's playing on symbols or motifs or images that are repeating, but I feel like it's kind of like a web. So it's not that it's going deep or that it has layers, but it branches out in so many ways. So that same thing that Gerald just said about the cash register, so it has that criticism of corporations, because it brings you to the private bottom line, and then later at the end when Abnesti is trying to convince Jeff to give the darkened flocks to Rachel, he says, look, it's a terrible thing about Heather, but hey, imagine how many people now, because of your work, can buy this. Like, how many consumers can now control their on or off love drug, was like the argument. Like, the way that you justify Rachel's potential death, Heather's confirmed death, is through dollars, right? So it's like it just keeps branching off, but it doesn't go down, I guess is what I would say. I would
Yeah,
agree
and
there.
I enjoyed the branching off. I think that's why I liked it so much. But I have to say, I enjoy stories that also go down. I enjoy that digging and finding more meaning underneath the surface, and so I do see what Gerald is saying there. How about you, Tamara?
Could be maybe. Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I do think that it was very much on the surface, but it was still interesting. I don't think that every story needs to have extremely strong symbolism for it to say something. So I feel like his intent was clear, and he definitely told a story, but the symbols just weren't like the yellow wallpaper as in your face.
Mhm.
You could
Remy?
also be making a critique of the drug or pharmaceutical industry, perhaps.
Oh, I think that's implicit. I don't even
Yeah.
think that's a perhaps. I think that is definitely implicit. I think, like, when it comes to morality and science, pharmaceuticals, how we look at murder, I think that is all wound up in this story. Like, the story has some very interesting direction to it.
Yeah, and then it's talking about like that web or that branching that I'm talking about. So now if you follow that thread that Rami just talked about, the next thing is that means there's a market out there for people who want to control their every emotion or want to control the emotions of their employees. So it just keeps going, but it doesn't go deep. And I think I agree with Tamara that, you know, I don't think it has to necessarily go deep. I think Saunders is somebody who knows exactly what he wants to say, and he says it
Hmm.
very well.
Yeah. I think that this brings to question, like, how we enjoy stories, really.
Mhm.
Because there are some stories that gravitate towards me. There are some stories that gravitate towards Annie's, and then there are some stories that gravitate towards Rami. And I find that it's interesting to figure out which type of story is really the best type of story for each of our personalities.
Cinderella.
Yeah, Cinderella is your story, Remy. And so, when it comes to, like, how we like to read, really.
Yeah.
I found it interesting that Amnesty, the scientist, was trying to make himself sound very benevolent and like he really cared, and he's a person too. Like when he asks Jeff, do you remember how many children I have, and do you remember their names? Like, I'm here too, just like you. We're in this together. It's okay.
Just
He
kill it
sound
all.
like Yeah, he sound like a politician almost.
Yeah, he kind of did, but he also kind of sounded like, when you have a scientist who's working with the same subject for a really long time, I think that there is a bond that probably develops between them, and that you can use that bond to manipulate, but I think the bond is real. I think he was manipulating it. And I found that whole conversation interesting.
Yeah, I'm glad that Tamara brought that up because he is extremely manipulative, and I like how I think he cares to a point because he has no problem when Heather dies. I mean, he's just uncomfortable watching a death the way anyone would be, but he's not heartbroken about it. And as soon as he doesn't get his way with Jeff, he doesn't try very hard. It's like, what, like a 5-minute conversation? He's like, forget it, that's Fax Albany. You know, like he doesn't really care.
Do you think that Abnesti left his remote control in there on purpose?
Yeah, I think it was part of the experiment.
Yeah.
Do you guys think it was part of the experiment
Really?
or an accident?
Oh, I hadn't thought about it.
Yeah, me neither.
No, I think because Jeff was starting to revolt against the experimentation, and I think Abnesti thought, yeah, he's served his usefulness. So I think that's why they just both left the room and left the remote there.
You thought it was because of that? I thought it was part of the experiment. I thought after he witnessed the death, I thought maybe the drug manufacturers came back and said, "Hey, we want to know like how that affected him long term. You know, see if he'll do it again, and if he doesn't, see what'll happen if you leave him in there. Is he going to take a happy drug? Is he going to take a forgetful drug? Like, I don't think they necessarily thought he was going to kill himself, but I think there was a question of, okay, this revulsion against death, this increase of humanity, how deep does it go? How strong is this increase? And so I think they were testing him, but I think that that's just because I've done studies, and doctors never tell you what the study is really about. That's part of quote unquote science. So if you're doing a psychological study and they tell you it's about one thing, it's about something related to that, but it's not actually about what they're telling you because that would ruin the study. Yeah. And so I actually thought that when they left the room that was part of the study.
Mm. Yeah, there would be no reason for them both to leave the room.
No, how many people does it take to work a fax machine? Unless that fax machine really is 30 years old and they need two people to figure out how the hell to
have to
work
go
a
to the
landline.
pick up the manual. No,
Yeah.
but that's interesting. It didn't even occur to me, but it's a really good theory. Like, it holds up. Yeah.
So, was there anything else you guys wanted to talk about with the story? Are we ready to go ahead and rate this puppy? I think we ran into this with Semplica Girl Diaries. I don't think that discussion lasted that long either. I think it was like there's something very concrete about his stories that makes it easy. Like his stories are easy to really drill down and get into and dig out the nuggets. Unlike some other stories where you have to really dig for that stuff. I feel like his stories are just there.
I mean, I have a couple more notes of just praise. So I'm like, does it matter? It's just I like the way he describes characters.
Praise away, girl. Praise away. We don't get enough from you.
Yeah. I like the way he describes characters, how he describes Keith as a tall glass of water. And then everything that Keith does or feels is told by his teeth. His teeth look scared. His teeth look excited. I like that. And I also liked Rogan's tattoo of a rat crying as he knifes a rat, and that rat's crying and knifing a smaller rat. Like, it was funny.
Yeah, it was like a really quick hand way of drilling down who this person is. And, the Southern guy comes in all smiles and like gonna shake his hand.
It is kind of strange because it's such a dark subject for a story. And yet he's able to bring humour, light into it, which I find fascinating. He's very clever. He's a clever writer.
Yeah,
I love him.
I think we know what she's gonna give this story.
Yeah, a 7.
We don't go that high. Okay, it looks like we're ready to rate this story. I'm going to give this a flat-out 6 right out the gate. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. While I do enjoy stories that drill down with a little more depth, I felt like this story did what it was meant to do. It made me think on topics that the writer wanted me to think on. I felt like the writer was in complete control of my emotions. He was a very good manipulator of my emotions throughout the story, and I flat out just enjoyed reading it. Like, it read quickly. I never once felt like, oh, I need to scroll, see how much further it's got to go. Like, this story was just a quick, fun, enjoyable read for me.
I'll go 5.5 because it's a great story, but I would like a bit more something underneath it, but still very, very enjoyable.
Um, I will give it a 2, because I felt disengaged after a certain point, and I think you know what point I'm talking about. After that, I was just turned off.
Wow.
You have been way too quiet to be giving out 2s.
Excuse, you're giving
No,
it a
I
2
always-
just because there was too much sex?
Well, it's a big part of it, because I always think I'm rating things in terms of will I recommend it to someone. So based on that logic, I don't think I would.
I was recommending the story before I had even finished reading it. I'm not even kidding.
You're like, I'm one paragraph in, you must read this.
Yeah, at the end of the Verbalucha paragraph, the first one he's describing the garden, the one that Rami pointed out, I was spamming my brother on Facebook Messenger like, you need to read this.
You know, one of these days we all just need to choose sex stories just to like get Rami over this. You know, like in psychology, when you have a phobia or you're just uncomfortable about something, you just pummel them with it until they get used to it. It worked with the magical realism for Gerald. We like did nothing but magical realism for 2 months, and now he can almost accept it. I think we need to do that for Rami, just all sex all the time for like 2 months of stories.
Have mercy on my soul.
I give it a 4.5 because initially it did not engage me at all, and there were places where I had to just kind of skim it to get to the next point.
That's fair. Unlike
Yeah.
a 2.
Unlike that too, we at least understand your rating.
Yeah, we get that.
Poor Remy. He just takes so much crap on here. I'm
But
just
I
glad he stays.
Like you said, skimming parts
It's
says
like a
lot,
huge
too.
red flag.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But Rami's very, very consistent.
Yeah.
You know exactly what he's
He
going to
doesn't surprise me. Like I can a lot of times just tell like he's not gonna like this. Oh, he's gonna love this one. Whereas Gerald will surprise me. Gerald, he'll come out and be like, I started hating it and then I liked him. I'm like, what? You just ruined all of my preconceived notions about you.
Good.
Okay. But we all know I'm a 6, right? I don't need to.
Yeah.
Well, you gotta say it. You gotta say it.
Oh, okay. It's a 6 because this is the best, and nobody will let me give it a 7.
Because you're not allowed.
We have to have some limits.
This is not an iPhone. There is no 6 Plus.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess we are all submitting our stories for next week.
Please do.
I am throwing into the pot In Search of a Man for Friendship and Possibly More by Empar Molinar. It is a translated short story on world literature today. I think I've submitted it before.
Okay. Anais?
I'm submitting a story from the creator of True Detective Season 1, but it's a story of his from 2003, so we're going back. It's called Ghost Birds by Nicolas Pizzolato.
Nice pronunciation.
Very nice. Just throw me under the bus. Because my pronunciation never gets that reaction.
Rami?
I'm going to stubbornly resubmit 3 questions by Leo Tolstoy. I've been trying to get it for over a month
Eventually
now.
we're going to get that story, Rami. I have faith
It's
in you.
just odds. Like statistically.
You know what? I was submitting the same story over and over and over, and then I finally submitted something different, and I got my story. So just stick to your guns. Otherwise,
Okay.
you're going to change. And
Or remember, Maya, when you were trying to get Black Box by Jennifer Egan over and over and over, and then I did it, and I got it, and that was so
yeah, that was
annoying.
just wrong. That was just wrong.
Tamara, what story are you submitting?
Yes, Ma'am by Langston Hughes.
Ooh, so many good selections this week. I'm not sure who I want to win. I think I want to read Langston Hughes, but I want to read some Tolstoy, so Like, not that the rest of us suck or anything, but I'm kind of excited about those two options.
Well, it's not up to you. It's up to this week's quiz. And I did look at having a quiz about drugs, but then I thought it was
You didn't want to out
dodgy,
us in public?
slightly dodgy territory for this lovely podcast. So it's a quite simple quiz this week, and it's famous people called George. So there we go.
Oh,
Why George?
Because
George
George
Saunders.
Saunders.
Oh, okay, the author. I thought it was a character.
George of the jungle.
Maybe that's one of the answers, Maya.
Oh,
Oh, this is going to be fun. This is going to be fun.
It's quick fire, well, sort of. Okay, so we start with Anais because she's on the left. I'm just going to give you a clue to the person's name. It's George, and you have to tell me who it is. Star Wars filmmaker.
George Lucas.
Yay! Maya. Animal Farm.
George Orwell.
Yeah, correct. Rami. Stuttering King. The number
I know
I'm
the
looking
first
for.
two. George. King George. Do you have to have a number?
I have to have the number, yes.
The third.
No. Anybody want to steal it?
The fourth?
I can steal it the fifth.
No. Not enough. It was the
Can we get
sixth.
the
The
sixth?
sixth? No, I thought it was the
I've seen
fifth.
a movie about him. It couldn't have been that long ago. I can remember like which George
I thought
we're
it was
on.
the fifth. Colin Firth. It's Colin Firth.
He's gonna figure out which George we're on and then like delete two.
Yeah, Colin. And Tamara, father and son presidents.
Oh my God, George Bush.
Is correct. See, nice and easy, apart from Rami's. Sorry. Okay. I do rotate the difficult ones, so don't worry about that. Okay, Anais. Last Stand.
Ooh.
I know of Custard's Last Stand. Was his name George?
Yep.
George Custard?
Yep.
Woo.
George Custer. Yep. Maya.
That was hard.
Because I've got the answer here. Maya. This is the hard one. Baroque composer.
George. It's a Baroque composer. George. Like, none of those names sound like they would go good with George. I'm just gonna pick Chopin.
It was Handel.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That was a guess.
Rami. Game of Thrones author.
It's right there, Remy. It's like right there. That's killing you.
I don't know.
Oh, come on. You know this. You know this. Come on. Just
Should
Everyone
Tamara
tells me to
steal
watch
'cause
this
she's
show
next?
anyway. George, no, it's not there.
No, I won't let anyone steal because everyone will shout it. It's George R.R. Martin. And Tamara founded Kodak.
can you repeat that? I'm not even sure I understood it.
He founded the company Kodak, the film company, the camera company. This is Tamara's.
George Kodak? I have no idea.
That's a good guess.
Sorry, it was George Eastman.
Hey, it was a very logical
called
guess. I would have gone there.
That was my guess.
Eastman Kodak, yeah. Okay, Anais. Norm from Cheers.
Norm from Cheers. The actor's name, I'm guessing. What's his name? Oh, I don't know his name. If someone wants to steal.
I got nothing.
I don't remember his name.
I mean, we're a bunch of readers.
Sorry, it's George Vint. Maya.
Okay.
member of the Beatles.
You gotta be kidding me.
No.
Go and. How come all I have in my head are last names?
It's called George something.
I'm like, I literally just, like, all I've got in my head are last names, and
Try George
none
Beadle.
of them are Beatles.
It's
No,
not
there's
Beatles.
no Beetle. There is no Mr. Beetle. I've got Ringo. I've got freaking Tiny Glass Guy.
Tiny glass guy. George Tiny Glass Guy.
Well,
I'm sorry, just the name of the Beatles escapes me right now.
instead of shouting to steal, should we just go in the order? So it would be Rami next, and
Okay.
Yeah, I've got nothing. I'm just I'm sorry. I'm bad.
Okay. Rami, can you steal
Pass.
it? Oh, okay. Tamara?
Harrison.
Harrison.
Oh, I can never remember Harrison. I'm like over here trying to picture the Beatles, and how come I always only picture 3? Poor
knows?
Harrison. I
everyone
feel
forgets
guilty.
Harrison.
Yeah.
He
Aw.
wrote my favorite song, While My Guitar Gently Weeps.
Yeah, I was thinking that, yeah.
Oh, that is such a pretty song.
Beautiful song.
I'm so
Okay,
bad with
Rami.
names.
Yes,
First.
sir.
First US president.
Washington.
George
There we
Washington. Yay, he's off the mark. Hooray. And Tamara, Ocean's 11 actor
George Clooney.
is correct.
Mm-hmm.
We have one round left, so that's just to build up the excitement, as it were.
Ooh. Tara's in the
Anna-
lead.
Anais, boxer and grill.
George Foreman.
Yeah.
Oh, that was good. That was a good one.
I was like, what?
I did the same thing tomorrow. How did you get that so fast?
I had a Foreman grill in college.
I did too. It kept me alive.
I should know that because all of the sons' names are George.
Very good.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah, very odd.
Okay, Maya. A Second World War US general.
Really? Really?
Right.
I got nothing. I'm sorry. I got nothing. I'm so bad on world history.
Steal.
Rami
Patton.
is correct.
My friend
Wow.
Amy is just going to throt me over the top of the head with history books.
Rami's catching up. Watch out, everyone.
Okay.
Rami, it's your question. Star Trek actor and social media star.
Stealing is in order, so you ain't getting it.
Thank you, Lord.
Star
Thank you.
Trek. No, I don't know this one.
Tamara
George Takei.
is correct.
Ah,
Is correct.
Oh my.
I thought
All of Takai.
I have his
And-
signature because it supported his Kickstarter.
Oh,
That's so
He's so
cool.
awesome.
Well done. And Tamara, the last question. Rhapsody in Blue writer. It's a music question.
I'm stumped.
Okay. Anise.
Oh my god, I'm forgetting. Even though it's the song that United uses. And they talk about it on their plane every time. To their video. Rhapsody in Blue is
George something.
Oh! No.
I keep forgetting. I'm drawing a blank.
Okay. Maya.
Is Sandtine's first name George?
No, it was
No.
not. It wasn't Sondheim.
I have no idea.
Rami, do you know?
nope.
It was George Gershwin.
Gershwin.
Of course.
Oh, that is. I know what song that is. Dang it. Oh,
I have to fly with United all the time, so I hear Rhapsody in Blue all the time.
I can't stand that song. I know that sounds horrible because I listen to classical music when I write, but I really don't like that song, and so it didn't even dawn on me that that was the song.
There you go. Well, we have
Oh,
a
now I'm
winner,
gonna have it in my head all day.
and that winner is Tamara.
Ooh,
Oh, yay! Yay!
beginner's luck. Don't get too excited.
Did you rig this since she's our guest co-host?
No,
Is that what
not
was
at all.
going on?
I don't know what order you're going to come up on my screen. So, Tamara, what are we reading next week?
Yes, ma'am, by Langston Hughes.
But
Smashing.
before, yeah, I was gonna jump right into it.
Sorry.
But before we let you go, full disclosure: while you were listening to this podcast, we slipped each and every listener some social gab, trademarked. With social gab, you are now fully equipped to leave a comment about this story at our website at literaryroadhouse.com, and you'll notice with the keen eye of a social media savant the share buttons to Facebook and Twitter, and links to leave reviews on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spreaker, and you'll feel inclined to check out our other shows, the Literary Roadhouse Book Club and the Bradbury Challenge, and leave reviews for them as well. And of course, you won't forget the most important step, sharing this podcast with your friends. Until next time, read a good story.
So much awesome. As always, she did not disappoint. Round of applause.
Fantastic.
Guys, you forgot to say that this is the 1 year anniversary podcast.
Oh, shoot.
The whole point.
I forgot 1 year anniversary. That's really funny.
No.
Just say it now and add it in. And we're still live, by the way. So you can...
That's really, really funny. Oh my god, that is so funny. Okay, what do you want to do for our 1 year anniversary? Let me
Hold on, I need to
stop
turn my
this.
recorder